Cool. Good. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Arrazola. I'm the owner of St Pete Ferments in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I'm also one of the co-founders for Florida Ferment Fest. So welcome to my virtual fermentation workshop on my Wicked Jack hot sauce. Um, I named it Wicked Jack, obviously, because it's hot. It can be very hot if you make it that way, but you don't have to make it that way. You can make it as mild, medium, or spicy as you like. And then Jack, obviously, because I incorporate locally grown jackfruit, which makes it just have a really unique flavor. And a little bit more about the jackfruit that I use. I make sure that it's ripened or tree ripened as much as I can control. A lot of people are used to the green jackfruit or like the young jackfruit. So the kind of jackfruit that I'm working with, you can see it's like very yellow, sometimes more orange in color. And it looks like a fruit you would want to eat. It's really tasty and it's much sweeter when it's fully ripened. So that's what I'm going to be using, and I'll kind of discuss different variations that you can make. If you don't have access to jackfruit, of course, you can use any kind of other fruit. Okay, so let's get started. The things that you're going to need, or things that I would recommend, obviously you're going to need a fermentation vessel with a lid on it. You're going to need some fermentation weights. People have all kinds of things that they like to use for that. I have these food safe ceramic weights, but you've got like a pickle pipe or like a glass weight, or even just a bag of water, that works too. And because we're dealing with hot peppers, I like to have a little square of parchment paper, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with that later, but you don't absolutely have to do this, but it can come in handy. I also use a scale to measure my sea salt and to make sure I have the right salinity or percentage of sea salt. And I think that's it for like the equipment. I also, as far as ingredients, you're gonna need water and sea salt. I've got some nice flaky Florida Pure sea salt, but just use any kind of salt that you like for fermentation. The main ingredients for the hot sauce are carrots, hot pepper. I like to use habanero. It really complements the jackfruit well. If you don't have access to habanero, you could just use whatever hot pepper you like. But to get that like nice orange color, I like to stick with like a orange, red, or yellow palette of peppers, but that's really just for aesthetics. It's you can use any kind of pepper you like. So I also have some red chilies that I'm going to use. Obviously the jackfruit is the next ingredient, and then some garlic. So I weighed all of these out ahead of time, and I'll go through all the measurements as we build our jar. And then ginger, I don't know if I mentioned that, but I like to add some of that. Okay. And then as far as the water goes, I just like to use some type of filtered or purified water. Just whatever type of filtration system you have at home, or if you're somewhere else, just get a little bit of water. But that's what I recommend. Just some kind of filtered, clean water. That's because I live in a city where we have more chemicals to treat the water. So oftentimes that can change, and I'm never really sure what's in the water. So just to be on the safe side, I use some type of purified water. Okay, that's it. That's all you really need. So let's start building the jar. It's nice to use a vessel that's kind of like open and big like this, just because I like to easily get the veggies out of fermentation and like just dump them. It's easy to have a wide mouth jar. Obviously, you can use other types of fermentation vessels if you have a crock. Some people, just use different things like that. Glass is nice if you're home fermenting because for me, it's psychological. You can see what's happening in the jar at all times. So it's a little bit better of a reminder, just in case anything goes awry, you can catch it quickly. So that's my recommendation on glass. And then obviously you can reuse glass. If you have an old spaghetti or pickle jar, that's perfect. You don't need to buy anything fancy. So when I layer these ingredients, just to kind of alternate things, and I like to mix the fruit between the layers of, the veggies and peppers that don't have as much of a sugar content. My recommendation is to, as far as how much of the fruit is, comprised of the entire ferment, I like to do between 10 and 20%, sometimes 25% of the overall amount of veggies used. That's because fruit has a higher sugar content. I think if I have gone above 25%, that can favor alcohol because this is going to be an anaerobic or oxygen-less environment. So you can lacto ferment with fruit. I just try to keep it, between 10 and 20% of the overall weight, so that you're not getting that alcohol or ethanol flavor in your hot sauce. So that's my tip. If you ever want to try this with, say, pineapple or mango, I think that would be really delicious. If you keep it in those ranges, then it'll maintain a good flavor for you. So I'm gonna layer these ingredients in. I'm gonna finish prepping my ginger though. So the pieces, this is like the finished jackfruit. I prepped this ahead of time because it's kind of a pain to prep. It's worth it, but it takes a while. Jackfruit has these latex layers throughout the fruit, and it gets very sticky. So if you buy a whole jackfruit, just be prepared. And I like to prep mine on a cardboard box, flattened, just so I don't ruin anything. So yeah, but this is kind of what the finished ripened fruit looks like. And obviously I take the seeds out and everything, but you just want everything to be in chunks, nothing too small, just, chunk sized, if you will. I'm gonna do the same for this ginger, just do chunks. It makes the prep really fast. Then you can kind of have more control in the end, how you want it to be blended. So we're just going to layer in these veggies. I'm gonna kind of prep these as I go along, just so I can show you on camera. As far as the peppers go, people have different preferences on how they ferment peppers. I like to make sure that they're perforated at least somehow. So whether you cut them in half or cut the tops off, just do something, because if you leave them whole, I find that sometimes they can create an air pocket inside, and the inside won't be touching any of the brine or the salt water, and I've had some issues with that. So just do something, either poke a hole in it or remove the tops, something like that. And then I don't remove the seeds until after fermentation, but you're welcome to remove the seeds before you put them in your vessel if you like. I think it comes out a little spicier if you leave the seeds, so I like to leave them. So I'm just gonna layer some carrots, some ginger, some hot peppers, and then a little bit of garlic, and then some jackfruit. For these measurements, these are in grams. I really recommend you get a gram scale if you're gonna be home fermenting. You can get them for like $10, and it'll really just help you make sure that you're using the right amount of ratios, the right amount of sea salt. A lot of people get a little confused and overwhelmed with fermenting at home because they want to make sure that they're using, the proper amounts of things so that, they don't have their ferment go bad or do something wrong. And I feel like your taste and your smell are a good indicator of how your ferment is going. But that's also indicative of the ingredients you put in. So that's just what I recommend. I did for this, we're gonna do 250 grams of carrots, 125 grams of jackfruit, and then loosely we did 75 grams of hot pepper total for between both types of peppers, 75 grams of garlic, and 50 grams of ginger. So that's just a ratio that I recommend. You obviously have more of the carrots and jackfruit, and then the garlic, hot pepper, and ginger a little bit farther down the list. And again, you don't have to do ginger, you don't have to do garlic. You can kind of do whatever you want. If you want to incorporate more spices like a black pepper or curry, you can certainly do that as well. So I'm just kind of separating the jackfruit as I stack it. Just kind of make it like a more even layer. And this stuff gets pretty sticky, so forewarning. Putting my peppers in. I like to make a pretty stiff hot sauce because I just feel like if you're gonna make hot sauce, you can make it really hot and then use less of it. But obviously make this as mild as you want. You wouldn't even really have to add hot pepper if you didn't want to. You could just make like a tasty lacto-fermented fruit and veggie sauce, and that would be fine too. Putting in some more ginger. Okay. So this will probably be my last round. I think I've done like this is my third round now of adding the jackfruit. Just want to finish the ingredients toward the end. The ginger is really nice. I feel like if you add this hot sauce to tacos, it's pretty perfect. Ginger just gives it like a nice kind of sweetness at the end. And I'm stuffing this down pretty aggressively as I get toward the end. So don't be shy. Just mashing this down. That'll help me create a little more headspace. So something like that, you can see. All right, so that's all the ingredients. It's always easier to add veggies first. If you try to do the brine first and add veggies later, it's going to be terrible. So don't do that. Next, we're gonna make the brine. I'm gonna show you how to do that. Sometimes I mix this up ahead of time, but lately I feel like people are getting into their salt percentages when it comes to home fermenting, which is great. It's the most accurate way to do it is to weigh your salt. So I have 400 grams of water. I know that's a strange thing to kind of do, is like weigh your water in grams. Something that's helpful is a liter of water weighs 1,000 grams. So if you have like a little pint jar, sometimes a mason jar or a ball jar will have those milliliter markings on the sides. And that's kind of a good indicator. So a half liter would be 500 milliliters. That would be 500 grams. That's kind of a shortcut way to do it while still being accurate. I went ahead and weighed this because my mason jar didn't have those lines, but that's just a little tip. So between all the veggies and the water, my total in weight is 950 grams. So if we multiply 950, I'm doing a 3% salt ratio, by the way, or salt percentage. 950 times 0.03 is 29 grams, which is 28.5, but I rounded up. So let's go ahead and weigh out 29 grams. Oops. This sea salt is pretty fluffy too, so that's another reason. Like a tablespoon of like some flaky, fluffy sea salt is going to be a much bigger volume than like a finer grain sea salt. So it's another reason investing in just a cheap little scale is nice. Okay. And I'm doing a 3% sea salt just because I live in Florida and it's a little bit warmer this time of the year. Sometimes the heat index gets to be, 105 or something crazy. So by adding more salts, I'm kind of giving it a little more protection versus if I did like a 2 or 2.5% sea salt ratio or percentage. And you can increase it even more if you would like. Usually adding more salt is going to lengthen your fermentation time or slow down the rate of fermentation, and less salt will decrease the time or decrease the rate of fermentation. So kind of keep that in mind. You can use that to your advantage different times of the year. I'm just going to add in my salt and mix it really well. This salt I really like to use because sea salt, like a good sea salt, can have up to 82 different minerals in it. So people are always, touting the benefits of fermentation, but salt is also a super necessary part of our health. And I think incorporating that through fermented foods is really beneficial. Getting those electrolytes and like your salt is, or your body is like a battery. So you need salt, like definitely need salt. So, all right, let's do it. So I'm just gonna pour the brine over the veggies. And hopefully we don't need any more, but I think we should have enough. Okay, so I had a little more than I needed, but we mostly got there. I'm just gonna pour or sprinkle some salt on the top, which is a good tip anyway, because it kind of prohibits anything from growing on the very top of your ferment. But if you do have anything growing on the top, like calm yeast, that's pretty normal, pretty expected. So when we're using ingredients like carrots or beets or peppers of any kind, hot peppers, bell peppers, they kind of lend themselves to creating more of a surface yeast, which is like a very kind of fine, feathery surface formation or pellicle that can form. So what I like to do to try to prevent that a little bit is using a little piece of parchment paper over it. It kind of hits the sides and the surface of the brine. And obviously things bob up and down. So it's not perfect, but it's just, you know, another safeguard to use. If you have a cabbage leaf, that's also a really good topper, we'll call it, on top of your veggies that are fermenting. Okay, so I like to just crumble this up into a ball, this parchment paper, and then I unwrap it. So that way it kind of is more, it's more pliable and you're not like fighting the shape that it came in when it was rolled in a tube. That's my little tip. And then I'm just gonna put this in on top. And then just to weigh it down a bit, I'm gonna use my weights. That's just gonna kind of keep the parchment paper from being unruly. And I think that's probably good. I don't know if a third one is going to fit, so I'm gonna leave it like that. And then last step is to just screw the lid on. Keep any buggies out. Do it like finger tight so that air can still escape. If you have a fermentation, like the kits that they sell, I've seen on the internet, if they have, you know, an airlock or a pickle pipe, that's gonna let your carbon dioxide out, because as your hot sauce is fermenting over the next few days, it's gonna get pretty active. It's gonna get pretty like aggressive in its fermentation. Usually the first few days, it's the most active. So something like that's gonna help, but even if you just have a plain plastic cap like this, that does really well. You would just wanna stick this in a bowl to catch any overflow if that happens. So yeah, that's how you build the Wicked Jack hot sauce. It's very easy, pretty simple ingredients. Just look out for the surface yeast that may form. But I find that this type of ferment, you know, it gets finished pretty quickly. Maybe about 7 to 10 days. 7 days, I've, you know, in my experience, it's been ready. But again, I live in Florida and it's pretty warm. Even in my house, it's not super cold. So just depending on your environment, you can, you know, start with 7 days and, you know, see if it's sour and to your liking. I've let them go as long as 21 days. And they do get much more sour, but I don't find that the flavor is necessarily like significantly better. So just when it tastes good to you or when it tastes sour, that's when you can pull it out of fermentation. Yeah, so now obviously, oh, and this is my finished jar. It looks very pretty. The color is going to maintain also those carotenes that you get, those like bright oranges and those yellows. They stay with the veggies during fermentation. So at the end, you can really get like a nice bright orange hot sauce. And all I did to make this, I can open this up. You can see it's like a nice orangey kind of. Jackie, your face is awesome. Give me 1 second. Luckily, I have like 40 jars of this hot sauce. Oh my God.
That was amazing. Oh man.
Oh, my cats are outside, so we can try again.
I wish you could smell it.
Can you edit that out, Jackie? You can just leave it. It's fine. Oh man. All right. As I was saying, I just leave mine in a paste like this. As far as like what most of us would probably know as like a traditional hot sauce, that would be like the strained version of this. But this is really nice as is. So it might be more of like a chunky sauce, but I kind of like it because it really just hurts my heart to throw out all that fiber and pulp from the fruit and from the veggies. So we're still gonna call it a hot sauce because we're saving more of it. So that's pretty much it as far as how to make the Wicked Jack hot sauce. So again, you just prep your veggies, you make your brine, do 3% sea salt by weight of all of it, cover it up and let it ferment about 7 days. And then I just blend it in a blender, and I don't have a Vitamix or anything fancy like that at home. So I just blend it up until, you know, it's all nice. And if you want to strain the seeds out, you can. Otherwise, you can just store it in these jars and not drop them on the floor like I did, and just keep them in your fridge for, you know, up to a year or however long, but you'll probably eat it before then. So, yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
I always blend my hot sauce before I ferment, and it always explodes. Is that why?
Yeah, that's
What's
like
happening?
I think there's just so much surface area on the particles. So if you think of like the surface area on, like, I guess the best example would be like if you have like a container full of rocks versus a container full of sand, right? So your surface area on the rocks is going to be less than like all those sand particles. So as the microbes are metabolizing the carbohydrates in your food, that's where you get those carbon dioxide bubbles, or the byproduct of carbon dioxide. And that's what causes the gas to form, just like we do when we eat carbs. So yeah, it's all about surface area. I know exactly what you're talking about, because I've definitely done that. So yeah, I find that just doing the chunks first, letting them ferment, and then blending them later, that's how to avoid that. I do see a lot of people ferment it that way. I think you do get a really good flavor. So if you're gonna blend it first, you need like a pretty significant amount of headspace.
Yeah.
Otherwise it will explode.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions about how to make fermented hot sauce?
Yes, I do. So, normal hot sauces, you always see vinegar as one of the components. I mean, is that like a substitute, or essentially the water with salt does the same thing? Does it create a different type of hot sauce?
So there's a couple notes I have on vinegar, and I'm glad you asked that because I would have totally forgotten. I think a few reasons people use vinegar is because it's like a classic ingredient in hot sauce. So, you know, that's just something that's very typical. one thing that vinegar does is it also lowers the pH in your initial ferment, which if you use, vinegar to lower the pH or to acidify your batch right away, or if you do like a like backslopping, or which is when people use like a finished ferment to inoculate or start their new ferment. That's kind of the idea I think people have behind using vinegar. The reason I don't do that, and actually I purposefully avoid that, one, either adding vinegar or adding a pre-existing brine to the ferment, is that these microbes metabolize or they ferment in succession. So the microbial communities you have in the first 2 or 3 days of fermentation are going to be significantly different than the communities you have in like the 7 to 10 day period. And that's when those acids, that like lactic acid that makes sauerkraut tart, that's the sourness you're going to get in your hot sauce too. So if you create a more, and again, I'm not a microbiologist, this is all just from my experience.
Fermentation.
If you create an acidic environment right away, you're not allowing the natural like succession of microbes to kind of do their thing. So I don't find that I don't even really find that it helps create a more safe ferment. I think just letting the microbes do their thing, letting that lactic acid form and do its thing, and letting the microbes take their own course over the process of fermentation. Now toward the end, if you want to add in that splash of vinegar, if you've got homemade vinegar and you want to add it as like a finishing ingredient, definitely I've done that, and that's really tasty. So, but I would recommend doing it after most of the work is complete. That way you don't disrupt anything that the microbes are trying to do. That way you don't add acetic acid to make that a much more acidic environment in the early stages. So yeah, doing it as a finishing product, I would add it to whatever once it's done, and then you can also kind of add it in slowly and see how you like to.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yeah.
I really like a very sour hot sauce, and I add an equal amount of homemade vinegar to the end after I've fermented it, and it actually makes it shelf stable. And then I don't have to store it in the fridge, so I can kind of like age it at in the kitchen, and it keeps for like over a year or more that way.
That's a good point. Yeah, and then doing it and then that way you can have both. That way if you have a batch and you want to keep half of it as like a sauce in the fridge, and then you could make half of it into something more stable. That way you have that option after you've successfully fermented, but then you can kind of have the best of both worlds that way. And I think the vinegar would also stretch out the consistency a little more. You get more of like that classic kind of hot sauce, like wateriness, but then you have much more of it too. So.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I have one more question.
Yeah.
So I missed actually maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes. I'm actually at work. I had to kind of sneak out, but I jumped in when you were already I guess dicing the jalapenos or the peppers, sorry, and the vegetables you were mentioning about perforating them. Was there anything before that I missed? I mean, is literally the whole bacteria and everything that develops is just literally from the vegetables that you put in and what's in the air? Because then basically, from my understanding, it's just whatever vegetables you want plus peppers, jalapenos, and then the brine. And I'm sorry, I'm a complete newbie. I don't know if I had to do any research before, but
No, you don't have to do any research before. I think Jackie's recording these workshops too.
Okay.
So you can look back on it, but just to reiterate, it was basically carrots, jackfruit. I used the ripened jackfruit, I did habanero, a mix of habanero and red chilies, garlic and ginger. And then the brine obviously was just water and sea salt. So you could do, you know, really any mix of veggies. I like to add different veggies besides just the hot pepper because they have a little bit more substantial carbohydrate content. So you can really get that like sour lactic acid flavor in the end product by doing that versus just doing peppers. So that's my tip, is to just add things that are a little bit sweeter, like carrots or even bell pepper, like a red bell pepper. Just by adding that to your hot peppers, that makes a big difference, getting that like nice sour kind of acidity. But then you can also substitute these. You could put your spice, you could put, you know, spices on the bottom if you wanted to do like a curry or something like that. You could add fresh turmeric and really give it that vibrancy of color. As far as the fruit, I like to keep it 10 to 20% of the overall weight of the ferment. But you could add other fruit if you don't have jackfruit, like mangoes and pineapples work really well. But yeah, and I think in the beginning of the video, I broke down how many grams of each I use. So
Okay.
you can use that as like a guideline for your ratios. So the fruit is less so that you don't favor too much like of an alcohol ferment. And then the veggies kind of take more of the bulk of the overall weight of the vegetables. So you can kind of use that as like a breakdown. And then obviously things like ginger and garlic I use less of because that's more for those, you know, added flavor notes rather than like the bulk of the, like the body of the hot sauce. So
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
Looks
well,
really
thank
awesome.
you.
It's really good.
It really is good. I've had it. So I'm gonna have this video up on the website so you can access it forever. And yeah, thank you, Sarah, so much for being a part of this.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yes. It was awesome. Awesome.
All right. Everybody enjoy your Labor Day. Don't labor too much.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Hey, great work.
I think we're still recording.
Oh, okay. Bye.